Okay. Hello, my dears. Good to see you. Good afternoon, evening, morning, whatever time it might happen to be in your part of the world. In my part of the world, it is 1 minute after 7 o'clock. And that's because my part of the world is California, and we are on Pacific Daylight Time. So, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. I am going to be reading more from Happy Hour in Hell. We're getting close to a little bit more than two-thirds of the way through. So we are into the part where it's fairly continuously stuff blowing up and happening until the end of the book, which is good for me because it's always easier to read those parts because they move quickly. What else? Well, the upshot is what did we do in the last some little while since I've talked to you? It's always hard to know because there's some crossover between the 1 in the morning broadcast and the 7 p.m. broadcast. So I always kind of wonder, am I just saying the same things to the same people over again? But anyway, went to go see the Fantastic Four movie yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. It was quite good. Enjoyed it. If you like comic book movies, you will like it. It has a lot to offer and a lot to recommend it. I won't go into greater depth than that because I know not everybody is a comic book person like I am. But as a comic book person, I enjoyed it, and it was very nice to see something that was within the larger Venn diagram, or at least the larger circle of what I would have wanted to see in a Fantastic Four movie. So that was all good. The dogs are doing better. We're still wrangling them a bit here and there, but basically they now kind of wander in and wander out whenever they want and can occupy the yard together. And now that I have found and sealed off Johnny's two escape routes, and he has to stay in the yard with Lemon, cannot flee by digging under a fence. He seems to be slowly growing used to it, and he is the main issue at this point. Lemon is, they're both very good with each other in the sense of there's no aggression, there's no grumping at each other about things, but Johnny still doesn't really want to have much to do with her. She's way too lively, she's way too in his face. She has no concept of canine or personal space of any kind. So she's either literally up in his face or she's got her nose in his backside, and she follows him around all over the place. And to be honest with him, and I said this last night, to be honest with him, like I'm an old guy myself, just like Johnny. Johnny's like 14 now, so he's definitely an older dog. He limps a bit. He's got some arthritis. And he mainly just wants to be left alone. And I totally get that. I mean, I love my family and friends. I love doing things with people. But I also love being on my own and just thinking and of course, that's also an important part of what I do for a living, which I'm still doing and will probably continue doing until I fall over dead. Or don't fall over dead, but essentially check out. And so, whatever the case is, I'm still going to be writing, and thinking time is super important to me because it's not a process whereby you can simply say, okay, I am going to think, and then 40 seconds later, you've solved it. It's a great deal of shuffling of concepts around in one's mind, of trying different things, seeing about this, thinking about that, saying, yeah, that seems good, but what if I follow it to its logical conclusion and I look ahead to later in the story? What will that have done to change what I had intended or what I will now have to do, and et cetera, et cetera. So I empathize with Johnny. I too am an old guy, and I too would like to be able to just sort of sit in the sun, or the equivalent thereof, since I hate sun. Johnny, despite being mostly black fur, loves the sun, just loves to bake out there, and he kind of always has. So it's not just because he's old and arthritic now. But that certainly doesn't hurt in terms of his current reasons for wanting to bask. But anyway, so yeah, no, I get it. I get it. And unfortunately for him, I contributed to an executive decision, and we brought him in a playmate, and he doesn't want a playmate. But they're getting along. They can pass each other face to face, and they can go in and out together at the same time if they think something's happening, or when it's dinner time or whatever. And Johnny can be out in the backyard all day, and Lemon can go out a few different times, and I no chaos comes of it, no upset. They're fine, you know. And Johnny will, of course, as I said, sometimes try to go. He will sometimes go to great lengths to avoid her. So that's the latest on the dogs. Things are getting better. Things are moving in the direction we hoped they would move. They just happened a lot slower than we thought would be the case. Oh, Lord. God save me from my own projections. So what else is there? Not really a huge amount. I've just been working and, you know, taking care of stuff in the household that needs to be taken care of, which is actually, I realized even if I retired, you know, and stopped writing, which I won't, you know, I'm not suggesting that I'm going to because I don't think I could. But even if I were to retire and stop writing, I mean, I would just still be busy every damn day. I would just get the household chores done sooner instead of having to put some of them off for a day or two or whatever. Because there's just so much crap to do in the modern world, and most of it is annoying. And most of it is purposefully annoying, but you've heard me sing that song before, so I won't start again. So, anything else? Not really. As I said, I stay away from politics on this particular broadcast, in part because everybody who wants to know how I feel about politics already knows, and in part also because in times like this, with all the weird crap going on in the world, and for me in my country, it's very useful just to have a place to go where that's not the case for a while. It explains a lot about the kind of television programs I watch, which are generally pretty silly. I'm big on silliness. I was raised on silliness. I taught silliness to my children. Well, Deb helped. And I'm a strong believer in silliness as a refuge from the dire realities we sometimes face. That doesn't mean you avoid the realities. That doesn't mean you abscond, that you completely, you know, annoy your responsibilities to the world and the people around you. But it does mean there are times when you have to shut that part of your brain off or you will be miserable all the time. And so that's kind of one of the things, actually, that's one of the things writing is really good for, because I have to go deep when I'm writing my stuff. I have to go deep. I have to be in that world. I mean, not literally. I'm not one of those writers who thinks like I actually go there or something like that. But in the sense that I have to go there as far as trying to imagine myself into the situations and see the things that I haven't dealt with yet and see the bits of background that need to be added to make things make sense and, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's a deep dive. It takes a certain amount of time to get down to that point, so to speak, and it takes a certain amount of time once you're down there to let possibilities play through and sift through things and do little mental experiments and all that stuff. So I need a certain amount of time. But I'm okay because I'm married to a woman who understands that, whereas Johnny's companion is an idiot toddler pit bull who follows him around everywhere, sniffing his butt. So I'm sad for Johnny. I'm happy for me that I am not in that situation. Not that Lemon doesn't follow me around. She follows all of us around. That's what she does. She wants to interact with us, and bless her for that, because she is a sweet, sweet dog. Okay, I'm going to check and see. Oh, stop that. Don't do that to me. God, okay, here we go. So let me see who's checked in so far. And I see Felina has checked in. Felina McNeil. Susan Shamblin has checked in. Isaac Tim has checked in from Utah. Tim Speckens, hello. Emily Bell, hello, darling. Barb Ann, good to see you, Barb. Nice to have you with us. Tracy McClatchy, another frequent attendee, and lovely to have you. Melanie Metters, or Meters. I think it's Metters, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Melanie is Melanie, and an online friend from way back. Ray Weatherford, good to see you, Ray. Pleasure. Kristen Rule, hello, Kristen. Claudia, hello, Claudia. Medardo Landon Mazadueñas, mi amigo, hello. Keith Dupereau, good to see you, Keith. Thanks for joining us. Mr. Mark Craigbaum, star of stage and screen, and old buddy and crony from way back when. And Christy Sanders. All those folks have checked in and left a comment. I haven't had a chance to read the comments yet because I was talking. Surprise. But anyway, so that's pretty much it. I don't really have a lot else to say because, I've just been running around doing things, patching up fences and uh, you name it. I've mentioned in the past we had a bunch of insurance stuff we were dealing with. That's now mostly behind us, but there was some of that. It's life. It's life, and it's particularly more lifelike when you work at home, I think, sometimes. Maybe not so panicky because you have a little more freedom to decide what to do when. But in the sense that there is no real, for me, no hard and fast way to block off. Like, this is my working time. Let nothing distract me. Because while my wife, Deborah, is world class at understanding that I need a certain amount of working time, and she's got her own work, and, we don't bug each other. Or if we do have to ask each other something, we always kind of stand there and wait until the person comes to a stopping point or whatever. But the rest of life doesn't give a damn. The rest of life just keeps coming at you in small and large problems. And if you're working at home, as I do and have for many, many, many years now, it is very hard to say, I'm not going to pay any attention to that now because technically it's my working time. Because you know that it's something that needs to be dealt with. The sink is leaking or whatever it might, the dogs have escaped, whatever it might be. You can tell what's been on my mind for the last couple of weeks. So you got to deal with it, or you want to deal with it. You're not going to sit there and go like you would if you were at work and say, yeah, hey, I'm 40 miles away. I can't deal with that right now. But when you're in the house, and something happens, either small tragedies or large catastrophes, you got to deal with them. So anyway, that all said, and none of it was worth much, I am going to go back to reading from Bobby Dollar. And so what happened last time is that the Bobby went up the hill, a hill that looks down over Pandemonium. And the reason I say it that way is for those of you who don't remember or haven't read the books, it's not, the normal word is pandemonium, which means the same thing, but I spelled it Pandemonium, D-A-E, because it was kind of older, closer to the Greek rather than the Latin. And of course, hell is supposed to be a very long-term institution. So anyway, that's why I say pandemonium instead of pandemonium, which is the common spelling and the common pronunciation. Anyway, Bobby followed or went at the directions of Marmora, the drowned girl, and went up the hill to meet Kaz, past her bodyguards because he was in a, what do you call them, like an aerial tram. He saw them waiting for her and knew that she must be farther up the hill. Got to the top, got out, talked to her, and she basically said, you don't understand. I keep trying to tell you this. All it's doing is making me miserable. It's never going to work. And even if it did work and you could get me out of hell, we have no future. Bobby, being Bobby, refused to hear that and said, basically, I'm coming for you tomorrow. And that's that. And if you don't want to go, well, we'll find out then. But I'm going to come and get you and take you away. So then on the way down, because he got angry with her and stomped off on his own, always a foolish thing to do. Not that I haven't done it in my time, but he does. He stomps off and doesn't take the tram back down and runs right into her bodyguards, who are the Candy and Cinnamon we met before. And after a couple of nasty fights, he actually succeeds in killing both of them, at least to the extent that one can kill somebody in hell, because of course they tend to get re-embodied. And that's basically where we left it. He was on his way back to the harbor where Rip Rash is, and where he intends to go the next day, supposedly after fetching Kaz. And he's going to go with Rip Rash. And Rip Rash is a slightly weird little cabin boy who looks sort of like a cat. And Gob, the boy that Bobby befriended in Abaddon when he first reached hell. So that's where we're at. Bobby has just finished a couple of terrible fights, including one that ended in kind of a berserker moment where he's so upset and angry and furious that he actually just stabbed the bejesus out of one of the bodyguards and eventually cut his head off. So Bobby and Bobby mentioned at that point that hell wasn't just getting to him; hell had gotten to him. A bit of an Americanism there, which I'm only thinking about because I just saw a YouTube thing about why do Americans say gotten? Because of course Brits and those who learned their English in the Commonwealth do not say it. They say got. They do not say gotten. They say rode. They do not say ridden. So anyway, and various other words that did not cross over during the split of American and English, or American and Commonwealth English. Anyway, so Bobby heading back for the nagging bitch in the harbor at Pandemonium. Before I reached Rip Rash's ship, I took a few moments to slip into the oily black shallows of the Styx and wash off as much of Candy's blood as I could. Then I climbed quickly back onto the dock, just ahead of a flotilla of large corpse-white eels who had come wriggling toward the smell of diced bodyguard. The one thing I couldn't fix was how I felt on the inside. Oh, here's where that quote came from, because I went back a paragraph, which was pretty fucking awful. I'd never experienced anything like the killing frenzy that overcame me, not even in the worst moments with the harps, on the most violent and terrifying of missions. And I had to admit something to myself that I'd been ignoring a long time. Hell wasn't just getting to me, it had already gotten to me. The realization made me cold all over. By the time I stumbled into Rip Rash's loading operation, I was shivering like someone in the final stages of malaria. The ogre didn't bother to ask me what had happened. As soon as he saw my bloody, dripping clothes, he just threw me over his shoulder and carried me up the gangplank to his cabin. He and Gob washed out the worst of my wounds, then bandaged me with comparatively soft cloth and gave me water to drink. I had just enough strength to marvel at how much like actual life it was living in hell. I could bleed here. I could go mad here. I could also sleep here. I fell into feverish dark. When I woke up, I was alone. I got to my feet, shaky as a junkie just gone through withdrawal, and climbed to Nagging Bitch's top deck. It was dark except for the distant red glow of the afterlights. Rip Rash was just sending home the last of his stevedores.
"Good you're up," he rumbled, "'cause the boy and I are going out, and I was about to wake you up to tell you. Didn't want you fretting when you woke up and found us gone."
Gone? I wasn't crazy with anger anymore, but I still had a healthy dose of hell-induced paranoia. Gone where? Rip Rash looked around carefully, then leaned toward me.
"Fellowship meeting," he said quietly. "It's our last night in port, so I'd feel bad if I missed it."
I'd already attended one of Rip Rash's meetings, and as interesting and even touching as it had been, I didn't need to go to another. Still, I would be waiting by myself on the ship, perhaps for hours, knowing all the time that Elagor's household must be looking hard for whoever had killed the two bodyguards. I hoped if they had a way to slip them into new bodies, it would take at least a while, because I was pretty sure that Candy had recognized me at the end. No, the more I considered it, the less I wanted to stay anywhere alone. "I'll go with you." Rip Rash, like most religious folk, was pleased.
"Good, good. I'll tell Gob. He'll be right pleased. He's really taken to the lifters, you know."
Gee, the kid felt drawn to a credo that said there might be something more to his life than an eternity of pain, hopelessness, and utter misery. I couldn't imagine why. The meeting was in one of the huge warehouses that fronted on one of the main Stygian channels. The floor of the warehouse was stacked full of sacks and earthenware jars, but the upper levels were less crowded, and on the highest floor there was a room that suited the lifter's purpose. It was empty but for black straw on the floor, and had a big window that opened onto the roof. Remember, kids, if you're going to start a heretical sect, always make sure you have at least 2 available exits. At least 3 or 4 dozen of the damned were waiting there, and the way they perked up at Rip Rash's arrival told me he was just as important to this little coven of malcontents as he had been to his lifters group back in Cocytus Landing.
Here, let me tell you about a fella I heard of, Rip Rash began when the crowd had quieted a little. I said, listen up, you scum!
Shushing by a 10-foot-tall monstrosity is actually pretty effective. In the new silence, I could hear the faint sounds of work gangs shouting a short distance down the dock, and the screams of the whipped slaves whose hard labor drove the crane that lifted and lowered the cargo. Even after weeks in hell, it didn't make for a soothing background.
There was this fella, Rip Rash began. I got no idea whether he's here with us or in the other place, but when he was alive, he had a big idea. His name was Origin, and he lived in Alexandria.
I lived in Alexandria, said one of the larger, louder audience members. I never knew anybody went by that. Rip Rash shook his big head.
Enough with your yapping, Poilos. You said that about Alexander the Great, too. How could he be so great if I never heard of him? Just keep your mouth shut for a change, and you might learn something.
He scowled, something that would have stopped the heart of most living humans. Poilos didn't curl up and die, but he did stop talking.
Good, said Rip Rash. Now, let me get on with it.
Having heard the talk about Origin and his ideas before, I admit I phased out a little. I was still wrestling with Temuel's connection to these poor damned bastards. It wasn't like Rip Rash was starting an open rebellion or anything. Rather, the contrary, as far as I could tell. Instead of urging his infernal fellows to rise up and overthrow their post-angelic overlords, he asked them to imagine a better day that might come at some unimaginably far date in the future. How could that be useful to heaven? A sudden idea occurred to me. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe this had nothing to do with some larger plan, nothing to do with the war between us and them, between the highest and the adversary. Maybe this was just something that Temuel really believed in. Maybe he actually thought that nobody, not the damned, not even their cursed jailers, was beyond redemption. That sort of took my breath away. I was suddenly filled with a sense of how big and tragic hell really was. God, if he was as responsible as my superiors claimed, had built a huge machine to concentrate suffering and institutionalize his punishment. The quid pro quo, as far as I'd ever been able to tell, was, if you do wrong, even if it is only once for a brief moment, you will be tortured for it forever and ever. Amen. Period. No appeal. No parole. But old Origin of Alexandria hadn't believed that, and maybe Temuel didn't either. Could that make any difference in the larger scheme of things? It could, if these damned souls believed it. It would give them something they had never otherwise had. Hope. So was my archangel really trying to bring comfort to the most afflicted of all? Or was it, as I had first assumed, just a cynical way to make trouble for the adversary? After all the time I'd spent here in the pit, and despite everyone who had been trying to destroy me, I was having more trouble than ever with the whole idea of hell. It's hard to think of the enemy the same way when you've seen them at home, met the wife and kids, etc. And I was definitely far into the etc. phase, considering that I thought of a female demon as my girlfriend, even if she said she didn't want to be. Was there still a chance Kaz was going to show up tomorrow night? And even if she did, how was I going to get her safely onto Rip Rash's ship? All of those unanswered questions made me restless, so I got up to walk around. That didn't last long, since the room was full of hideous hell creatures, annoyed with me for creaking the floor while they were trying to listen to Rip Rash. So I wandered out into the open corridor that crossed the upper level. Most of the storage rooms were empty, and their doors were open. For a moment, I thought I saw a disturbingly familiar shape, gray and hunched, in one of the doorways. After a moment's stunned surprise, I pulled my knife out of my belt and cautiously approached the door. When I stepped through, the room was empty of even the piles of black straw that I expected, and the window at the far end was open, the shutter still propped up. Could it really have been Smiler? But if it had been, why would he run? Was he afraid of all the others in the nearby room? Somehow that didn't seem quite what I expected of him. Maybe he was just waiting for a better opportunity to get me alone. Rattled, I hurried back to the greater security of Rip Rash's lifter meeting, but I had barely slipped back inside when I was startled by a crash and harsh voices from downstairs. I wasn't the only one. Eyes widened in the near darkness all around the room. Then, a second later, our quiet gathering of damned turned into a cockroach party suddenly exposed to light, malformed shapes scuttling in all directions, as the first of the murderer's sect guards burst through the door with whips and torches and nets. Had Smiler been spying on us for the authorities? It didn't really make sense, but it was hard to believe his being here was a coincidence either. I struggled through the chaos looking for Rip Rash, but the ogre appeared as if from nowhere, picked me up by the back of my neck like a stray puppy, and carried me toward the window. He held Gob in his other massive hand, and before I could even make sense of his plan, Rip Rash had leaned so far out of the window that the boy and I were dangling in midair, nothing beneath us until the hard stone cobbles nearly 100 feet below. I didn't have much time to think, however, because a moment later I felt a massive yank, and Gob and I were flying through the air with everything spinning around us like the view in a kaleidoscope. It took me a panicked half-second or more before we crashed and rolled and slid to a halt, and I realized that Rip Rash hadn't flung us down, but all the way up onto the roof of the warehouse. After that, I was too busy to think about anything much, trying to find my weapons and dodge the shrieking lifters who had found their way to the roof. I quickly got separated from Gob in the mad skirmish. It was no longer just the other lifters on the tiled roof now. The murderer's sect bullies had arrived, climbing up after us, and they were wading into the nearest of the squealing heretics, dealing out what looked like serious pain, tearing flesh from backs with their bladed whips, crushing limbs and skulls with heavy maces. Those they had beaten down were hauled away in nets, trussed and left at the corner of the roof, while the guards concentrated on those of us who were still free. As I staggered toward the edge of the roof, waving my boot knife and trying to put as much space between the guards and myself as possible, I heard a scraping, rasping crash and then thunder from just below us. I looked over the edge and saw that Rip Rash had taken the easiest way out of the room downstairs, smashing his way through the constricting window frame, taking a lot of the surrounding wall with him as he jumped to the distant ground. He had apparently landed safely, and now stood in the middle of a pile of debris and shattered paving, looking up.
"Jump down!"
the ogre bellowed when he saw me.
"I'll catch you! Don't be afraid!"
He held out his massive paws. I hesitated, not because I didn't trust him, but because I still didn't know where Gob was, and I couldn't just leave the kid behind. He never would have been in Pandemonium if it hadn't been for me. I saw him, at last, struggling like a wet cat in the arms of a guard. Gob's captor had leathery skin and lips that stuck out in bony beak-like plates, as if to demonstrate how a real-life mutant ninja turtle would be anything but cute. Gamely as he was fighting, Gob clearly didn't stand a chance. His assailant had already all but immobilized him and was only a moment from getting him into the net with a bunch of others. I dove on the guard from behind, jabbing my blade deep into where his kidneys should be. I was slowed down by the chainmail stuff he was wearing, but the demon cutter was a big knife, and I slammed it into his back with both hands. He made a surprised, croaking noise and let Gob drop. I didn't bother trying to retrieve the knife, but snatched the kid up and dodged through the chaos of guards and lifters on my way to the edge of the roof. Down below, Rip Rash was fighting with 3 guards, but he was winning. And when I screamed his name, he looked up, then made quick work of his enemies, literally knocking the head off one of them with his fist. I threw Gob down to him. I had a second or two to watch the boy tumble into Rip Rash's massive hands. Then I was snatched back from the edge of the roof by a couple of murderer sectarians. 2 or 3 more joined them, fell on me like thick men on a rugby ball, and that was about it. The last I remembered was someone beating the thoughts out of my skull with some kind of club. It was the worst drum solo ever, and for me, that's saying something. But fortunately, I didn't have to experience it for long. Chapter 33, The Conference Room. I was awake for some time before I opened my eyes, but my senses kept telling me I was in a meeting room, in some Holiday Inn or a Hilton business hotel, when I knew I was actually in hell. Still, I could definitely smell coffee and glazed donuts and the scent of room freshener purchasable in bulk quantities. I was just trying to make sense of it when someone spoke. My, Advocate Deloriel, you are a persistent little beast, aren't you? My heart didn't just sink. It crawled into the darkest, deepest corner of my chest and refused to ever come out again. My eyes popped open too, even though I immediately wished they hadn't. So I could have pretended a little longer the whole thing was a clubbing-induced dream. Grand Duke Eligor stood over me in full hellish nobility drag, 7 feet tall, in Renaissance-ish robes of flowing black, with a high collar that came up right under his chin. The only odd detail was that, except for the inhuman smolder of his eyes, he was wearing his Kenneth Wald human billionaire face instead of one of his really scary ones. And not that I wasn't scared. I did my best anyway. Nice outfit, Ellie. Remind me again what the safe word was? He didn't say anything. The room looked exactly like it smelled, with Wald Eligor standing at the other side of a perfectly ordinary conference table in a perfectly normal hotel conference room. At least it would have been in Visalia or Bakersfield or San Leandro. There was even a box of donuts and a coffee service with artificial sweeteners and powdered creamer. The only thing missing from this vision of Rotarian perfection was a window with Venetian blinds open to a view of the freeway or a business park next door. But this room had no windows. Eligor folded himself gracefully into a chair just across from me. I didn't seem to be restrained in any way, but I wasn't quite ready to test that. Not yet, since it was almost certainly what he'd expect me to do. I had no leverage at all, except possibly to do something unexpected. And I probably wouldn't get a second chance, so I was going to wait until I actually thought of something worth trying. In the meantime, I knew Eligor the Horseman well enough from our previous encounters to know he didn't mind talking. So that was all some trap of yours? The Grand Duke smiled a little. What, that little holy roller meeting you were attending? Do you really think I would have set some elaborate trap for you? The Countess was right. You do have an exaggerated sense of your own importance. No, nobody even knew you were here, little angel, although you were trying very hard to get noticed. Honestly, you came to my own house, Dollar. I thought heaven didn't allow suicide. And I thought hell would knock the pussy out of someone after a few million years. But clearly I was wrong. You saying you didn't come after me? He shook his head as if it almost wasn't worth answering. We've been looking for Pseudolus ever since you made your little visit to Flesh Horse. Did you think we wouldn't check with the liar sect to see if you were legitimate? Then, when somebody took out his bad temper on candy and cinnamon, well, as you can guess, we were getting very interested. When the Pandemonium City Guards picked you up with those lifter idiots, one of my informants recognized you as the one we were looking for. So here you are. He shook his head. You've all but ruined the Countess's bodyguards. Was that really necessary? First you kill my assistant back in San Judas. Now you come all the way to my place here and do in a couple of harmless wage slaves. You have something against working folk?
Enough of your bullshit,
I said. Let's cut to the hugs and learning so we can finish this. You want the feather. That's why you sent Smiler after me. Our business with the Countess aside, I had to do something since it was obvious after that you weren't going to leave me alone. And you knew I'd made it into hell because Smiler followed me here. So don't pretend you're surprised to see me. He looked at me for a long moment, his face as blank as a weathered statue of some ancient king. Yes, Smiler, he said. Of course. You don't need to play games, big man. You hold all the cards. Do what you're going to do. I'm not giving you the feather, and I'm not going to tell you where it is. You'll just kill me anyway, so why should I make it easy on you? He smiled, his lips curling slowly back. Let me try that one again. He smiled, his lips curling slowly back, an unhurried predator with a staked-down meal. For the first time, I could see that he was probably as old as the planet, if not older. Very good. The hero speech. But I think you're supposed to say that after I've tried to soften you up a little. Has more resonance that way. Go ahead, I said. Take your best shot. What are you going to do with this? I gestured to the conference table and the bad oil paintings. Make me sit through a sales pitch for a timeshare condo? Oh, you don't approve of the decor? Elagor looked around. I requested it just for you. I thought it would make a small-timer like you feel at home. We can do something else if you'd rather. And just that suddenly the room was gone, and I was falling through whistling blackness, grabbing at nothing, helpless. How about this? Watery light all around me. Dirty glass, stainless steel tables striped with old blood, ancient linoleum brown with the dried scum of countless vile fluids. Hanging above the operating table on which I was strapped was a gallery of machines that would have made Torquemada flinch. Drills and bone saws and claspers and graspers whose purposes I couldn't even grasp, but whose rusted stained surfaces spoke volumes. Or, if you're more of a traditionalist, said Elagor's voice, we could try this. The light dimmed. Now there was only a single torch, just bright enough to reveal that the ancient stone floor around me boiled with crawling things. The walls, too, were alive with moving, clicking shapes. I gasped and jerked, but I couldn't get up, let alone away. How about surrealism? You like all that 20th century stuff, don't you? I was stretched in a dozen directions, my eyes impossibly far apart, binocular vision in two separate directions. A vast mouth had replaced the pale ceiling above my head, lips as big as the front end of a car that giggled and made kissing noises and murmured things I couldn't quite hear while a fine mist of saliva fell down onto my face. Spiders with the heads of birds and birds with the heads of medieval harlequins hopped and fluttered all around me. The lips made a choking noise, then rounded into an O, and something gray and ropey and as big as a gorilla began to climb down from between the teeth, eyes floating around in its body like bubbles in a bag of liquid. Or maybe you're beginning to appreciate the original theme, Elagor said, and suddenly the hotel conference room snapped back into being around me. You see, it doesn't really matter. You're not in a place, Deloriel. You're in my place. And you will tell me where the feather is. It's only a matter of time, and we've got forever. Great roiling billows of crematory flame leaped from the walls, red and yellow and orange, the same hideous orange as Elagor's eyes. I couldn't see Elagor anymore, though. I couldn't see anything but the flames. I felt my skin charring. I felt it dry and then crack, then burn away. I felt my nerves become blackened wires, my muscle tissues shrivel and catch fire, my very bones burst into flames. I felt just what you would feel as you burn to death, a level of shrilling pain in every fiber that cannot even be described, agony beyond anything I could have imagined. And I kept feeling it. It went on. It went on and on and on. I don't know when it stopped. Hours later, days later, maybe. I was somewhere else by then. I was someone else. The person who had been burned that way, that Bobby, that angel Deloriel, was gone now beyond retrieval. That person could never exist again, and the thing that remained behind would never stop screaming, I felt sure, never stop burning. Eligor carefully picked out a donut. "The last powdered sugar," he explained. "So, where's my feather?" It took a while to form words, although from what I could see of my trembling hands, I was whole and unburnt again, as though I hadn't just experienced a lifetime's worth of scorching, unholy agony. "Fuck you." "Right then," he said, and saluted me with his world's greatest boss mug as the flames blazed up once more. He had lots of other ways to hurt me when he got bored with hellfire, some of them quite inventive. I had to watch Kaz tortured and raped by Eligor himself and various demons, or at least something that looked like her. Then later I had to watch another version of Kaz, participating happily, even enthusiastically, in all the same activities, even as my own nerves were stretched and burned and scraped and tormented. Eligor liked to cover all the bases. I talked. Of course. Fuck yes, I did. I told him everything I knew about the feather and everything else. Pain hurts. Pain in hell hurts even more. And this was a personal pain that Eligor wanted me to feel, and he made sure I got every last drop. I don't think it had as much to do with Kaz as it did with me being an annoyance. The fact that unimportant me had managed to waste so much of his precious, infinite time. You'd think he'd have thanked me for the diversion, but no. It didn't seem to matter that I was vomiting out every secret I had, though. Eligor went right on hurting me. After the flames, I found myself in a place bright and white as an industrial clean room, where men with faces featureless as thumbprints pounded on me with iron hammers, smashing every bone in my body, flattening me like a cutlet. Each blow forced more screams out of my mouth, which changed shape with each strike, so that it was almost impossible to form words. But still, they kept hitting me, and I kept screaming out what I knew. Dark, oily liquid. Writhing things sinking their teeth into my flesh and wrapping around me like sex-crazed eels to pull me down. I managed to kick free just before I drowned and made it back to the surface, gasping out foul, poisoned air and taking in lungfuls of something not much better, only to be yanked down into darkness again. And again. And you've got it by now, right? Packs of rotting skeletons trying to eat my face as I struggled to escape over mounds of garbage. This was less fun than it sounds. My skin trying to tear itself loose from my body. Exactly as fun as it sounds. A chamber full of stinging ants and biting flies the size of pigeons. Me with no arms or legs. An all-black room where nothing happened except an excruciating pain blooming right in the middle of my skull, like an insane sea urchin with thumbtack spines trying to shove its way out through one of my eye sockets. It got worse and worse until I finally tore my own head off my neck, at which point my head grew back and the process started over. And every now and then, just to remind me why I was literally suffering the tortures of the damned, I would be back in the original conference room with Eligor. He would ask me a few more questions, or the same questions again. Sometimes he just looked at me and laughed. Then I went back into the acid bath or dangled on the electric fence again. A couple of times he was reading emails on his cell phone and didn't even look up. Once I saw Kaz standing straight and silent as Eligor held her with one hand around her neck, like a chicken going to the chopping block. Her eyes were wet and her lashes frosty with crystallizing tears, but she didn't move, didn't speak. Back to the crematory flames again, but this time all my friends from the compasses were there with me. Monica, Sweetheart, Walter Sanders, all of them shrieking as they burned, begging me to help them. The next time I came back to the conference room, Lady Zink was waiting for me, eyes bright with madness. While Eligor watched and drank his coffee, Vera raped me again, just as she had before. Then she took me in ways she hadn't been able to do before. It all hurt worse than you can imagine. Merciful God, a lot worse. Vera disappeared after a few thousand hours. "Little man," said the Grand Duke, grinning, "you've had a busy day." He sent me to a room whose floor was wire mesh painted with acid. The flesh kept melting off my bones and dripping through, and as determinedly as I crawled, the door remained just as far away. An endless desert of broken glass and salt. A dim forest full of predatory birds with teeth. They laughed like demented children. More fire, needles, filth, innocent suffering. Over and over and over. Over and over. As kind of a break between bouts of indescribable agony, Eligor would pause the torture ride to explain how things in the universe really worked. Oops, sorry, my chair is sliding. As a kind of break between bouts of indescribable agony, Eligor would pause the torture ride to explain how things in the universe really worked. Kind of like those old educational fillers they used to run between the Saturday morning kids' cartoons. The first time he appeared as I was screaming helplessly and said, "You know, you've got it all wrong." I didn't answer, being too busy spitting out blood and bile. "You see, heaven has you suckered. They're not against what we do. They ordered us to do it. We're the official alternative. We're as much a part of God's system as the guards who work in a prison." I spat again and mustered a single, "Bite me." "No, really. You might as well hold a grudge against the factory that makes judges' gavels. We're doing our job, same as you." Another time he popped in to say, "Actually, I lied when I told you we're doing heaven's work, because there's really no such thing as heaven." I wasn't going to respond this time. Something had pulled my tongue out a few hours earlier and hadn't bothered to reattach it yet. "It's kind of like a science fiction story, really," the Grand Duke explained. "Hell, heaven, it's all nonsense. Earth was conquered a long time ago by invaders from space, but humans don't realize it yet. The aliens lifted all this stuff right out of our subconscious to keep us docile, towing the line and behaving like a good little captive populace. Do you see how it all makes sense now?" Later on, when I had my tongue back, Eligor had a new explanation. "Actually, it wasn't aliens. I lied about that. It was humans from the future when they mastered time travel. They realized that the kindest gift they could give their benighted ancestors was to create the kind of universe the primitives already believed in. So they did. All this stuff, me, you, the highest, everything was invented by mankind's own descendants. Kind of like being humored by your grandchildren, huh?" "Yes, Grandpa, that's right. A loving God watches over you and punishes all the wicked people. Now finish your nap." The Grand Duke seemed to love doing this and kept reappearing with some new explanation of how the universe was ordered, many of them possibilities I had considered myself. Maybe one of them was true, maybe more than one, maybe none. I'm pretty sure that he was just shitting on everything that might explain things, everything that might mean anything at all, so that I was left with the belief that nothing made sense. A bit like modern political advertising, when you think about it. Anyway, even Eligor got tired of that game after what seemed a few centuries and left me to the serious physical torture, which went on and on despite the fact that I had no secrets left. Or perhaps because of that. It's hard to know with hell. You can't even be sure about death and taxes there. The only certain things, are pain and sorrow, and then more pain. So, Deloriel. Eligor put down his cup and sat up straight in his conference chair, as if the flames and poison and murder had just been the preliminary handshakes and bows, and now the business meeting could begin. Tell me where the feather is now. It felt like it took me about an hour to find the strength to talk. I told you everything. No, as a matter of fact, you didn't. You told me it was in your jacket pocket, hidden by some angel trickery with your body in a house in San Judas. My people went over every inch of the place. Your body isn't there. Even out where I was, on the far side of 1,000,000 years of torment, this scared me. Not because I cared about my Earth body at this point, or even G-Man and his girlfriend Posey, who were living in the house, but because all I wanted to do now was die the real and final death, and I knew Eligor wouldn't kill me until he had the feather back. It's gone. In fact, now that I think of it, the whole thing's a bit convenient. You had the feather all along and didn't know it? And it was your buddy, Samariel, who caught grasswax trying to plant it on you? Cute, since your friend's hiding out in that discount version of heaven that the third way dreamers created. And to make it even more suspicious, we both know who Samariel takes his orders from. I was having trouble keeping up, and not just because of the pain. Eligor was wrong. I hadn't tried to hold anything back. If the feather was gone, if my body had disappeared, I was just as surprised as anyone. Sam takes orders from... You mean Kephas? Yes, Kephas, or whatever name you want to use. The architect of this whole fiasco. The mysterious higher angel had recruited Sam to the third way and had given him the tools to make it happen, including the thing Sam called the God Glove, which he had used to hide Eligor's marker for his deal with Kephas, namely Kephas's own angelic wing feather. Hid it on me, as it turned out, although I hadn't known it at the time. It was what got me onto Eligor's radar in the first place. I really wished I had never seen or heard of the thing. Bam! Eligor hit the table and made his cup jump, sloshing coffee across the imitation wood-grain formica just as if it were real coffee, in a real room, in a real place. I want it, and you're going to fetch it back for me. Yeah, right. If it's gone, I don't know where it is either. Get thee behind me, shithat. I didn't really feel him hit me. It happened so quickly. I just suddenly realized I was on the other side of the room, lying in a heap on the patterned carpet, with my vision blurred and my head clanging like a church bell. Eligor stood over me, 20 feet from where he had just been sitting. Watch your mouth. You wouldn't be the first dead angel I've made. His bald disguise seemed perfect from a distance, just like a human body and face, but from inches away I could see the fires beneath the skin leaking through his pores.
However, I'm a pragmatist, so I'll make you an offer, little wing. You may live to fight another day for the glory of your bullshit holy city in the sky. I didn't dare breathe, let alone speak, because I was still nearly paralyzed by how hard he'd hit me. And even after all the shit I'd just been through, I was terrified he'd hit me again. It felt like he'd shattered every bone in my body, and I was quite ready to roll on my back and show him my belly. What had made me think I could mess around with something like Eligor and survive? Nobody that stupid deserved to live. The Grand Duke was suddenly back in his chair. A moment later, with no conscious understanding of how it happened, I was sitting in the chair across from him once more, trembling like a whipped puppy. "Here's the deal," he said. "I want that feather. It should never have left my possession. It's my insurance policy for Kephas keeping faith. I don't trust anyone, but I trust ambitious angels least of all, and Kephas is nothing if not ambitious. So you're going to go back and get it, then give it to me. If you don't..." He lifted his hand, and suddenly Kaz was there beside him. This time she had a blindfold over her eyes and a gag in her mouth, her hands bound behind her back. "If you don't, I'll give her everything I've just given you, and a lot more." I had no power, no leverage, nothing. I was completely outgunned, outsmarted, and outclassed. I didn't have any choice at all. "No," I said. "No deal." "What?" Eligor's cry of fury was so loud it toppled me onto my back. "Do you want to see her burn right now? Burn until there's nothing left? Right now, you little insect?" Don't do that, please." Eligor was so much more powerful than pretty much anything I knew, that it was exactly like having fallen into the lion's enclosure at a zoo. The only thing I could do was move very, very slowly and hope that he didn't destroy Kaz out of sheer irritation. It would be a mistake. "You have a couple of seconds to explain before I render you into individual atoms, each one extremely pain-sensitive." Eligor's face was shifting now, as though I'd made him so angry he was having trouble looking even remotely human. I saw a hint of goat horn, a glimpse of suppurating skin, a glint of shiny metal skull, flashes that came and went all in a moment. "Look, I'll give you the damn feather. I don't want it. I only came here because you sent Smiler after me, looking for it. But you have to let us both go, me and the Countess." "Both?" Eligor was pushing his anger down now, but I could tell he wasn't enjoying himself. "Why should I do that?" "Because otherwise I'll just keep saying no. Then you could torture me forever or kill me when you get bored. You could torture and kill Kaz, too. I could never stop you. And the only thing I have that you want is the feather. So let me go and let her go, or forget it." He raised an eyebrow. He had regained his composure, was handsome and incredibly successful Kenneth Vald once more. "I'll say this for you, Deloriel. You've got balls like grapefruits." He moved his finger, and Kaz was gone so quick I didn't even have a chance to look at her face again, in case it was the last time I saw it. Then he flicked his finger at me, and the conference room, the donuts, the spilled coffee, everything around me disappeared, and I was alone with my pain and the horror of my recent memories in yet another version of the conference room, this time floating in an endless space as empty and gray as the evening fog coming through the Golden Gate back home. Emptiness is another form of torment. Loneliness, too, especially when they both go on forever and ever and ever. And that
my friends, is where we are going to stop tonight. And that worked out nicely, actually, because that's the end of the chapter. So, I hope you enjoyed that catalog of horrors. I don't know how anyone could, but I hope at least the writing was interesting. You know, people often say, how can you write? You seem like a nice person. Not that many people say that to me, but occasionally somebody who I have managed to fool with my carefully crafted public persona will say, you seem like a nice person, Tad. How can you write those things? I used to get that question a lot about Dread in the Otherland books, who is, of course, a horrible, horrible serial killer. Mutant serial killer, I guess. And the answer that I've always given is you don't have to be that kind of person to try to understand and create that kind of character. If not, almost all writers would be evil bastards because, let's face it, most people, especially in fiction and extra specially in genre fiction, like to write villains from, Miss Havisham to Dolores Umbridge, just to name a couple of female villains. Everybody likes villains. Everybody enjoys villains because there's something that we can hold at a remove, either in a film or in a book, and appreciate and be horrified by without having to deal with them in real life. So I just like making up villains, and I love making up horrible things, in part perhaps because I don't like horrible things, and so it's interesting to go into one's fears and learn what exactly it is that seems horrible to me, and then share it with the readers. And as with all kinds of things in fiction, you can only hope that you will hit the same nerves that those things hit in you. You cannot write to an imaginary audience. You sort of have to write for yourself and hope there are other readers out there who are enough like you to appreciate it. Not necessarily to enjoy it, because as I said, it can be something horrible, but that are enough like you that they have the same fear and panic buttons you have, or some, or at least can empathize. Anyway, I was going to finish, and now I am finished. So thank you very much for joining me. As always, a huge pleasure. Be good to yourselves, be good to your friends, loved ones, and family, and anybody else around you who looks like they might need a helping hand. Peace. Be well, and I will see you all, as far as I know, next week. So thanks, and ciao.